to our wonderful speaker, David Anderson.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, Reef. I'm glad to be here tonight. My name is David Anderson. I drove down from Boca Raton, Florida today, just about 2 miles away, or 2 hours away, I should say. Wish it was only 2 miles. It was 2 hours from South Palm Beach County. A nice drive today, staying the night, enjoying time in Key Largo here while I visit Reef and the islands. So yes, I work out of Gumbo Limbo Nature Center in Boca Raton. I'm the sea turtle conservation coordinator there, responsible for 5 miles of nesting beach. So tonight, I'm going to tell you all about sea turtle nesting in South Florida, specifically Boca Raton as our case study. All right, this thing was working earlier. Oh. All right. All right, excellent. All right, well, thank you very much, Mead. All right, well, like I said, I come from Gumbo Limbo Nature Center in Boca Raton, Florida. We have 5 miles of nesting beach. We are employees of the city of Boca Raton there at Gumbo Limbo Nature Center. So Gumbo Limbo monitors the 5 miles, and it's not working again. I'm just going to have to hit the arrow key here. All right. So anyway, overview tonight. First half of the presentation will be about sea turtle conservation in general, nesting. I'm not sure how you're all familiar with the different species of sea turtles and the nesting activity that happens in Florida, much less Southeast Florida. But I'll go into that. Once again, you'll see a lot of Boca Raton stuff, so it'll be our case study coming out of Boca Raton. And then the second half of the presentation, talking about some threats to sea turtles. So we are based out of Gumbo Limbo Nature Center. My staff and I go across the street onto the beach, and we monitor 5 miles of nesting beach. And we have a lot of other activities listed on our marine turtle permit number 041. So we also have 3 permanent residents at our nature center as well that we care for. So if you ever come up to Boca Raton and visit Gumbo Limbo Nature Center, you would see 3 permanent resident sea turtles: Morgan, Lady McNubbins, or 2 green sea turtles, and Lefty, a Kemp's Ridley, like one of the only Kemp's Ridleys in captivity in the entire east coast of Florida, actually. And we also, while we're out there looking for turtle tracks, and we might as well, monitor the beach for bird activity as well. And we get a colony of least terns that visit our beach, usually every other year or so. So we're always on the lookout for that. When they start exhibiting nesting behavior, with the help of FWC, we go out there and cordon off a perimeter for those birds. As I mentioned, we have 5 miles of beach in Boca, and for data collection and submission purposes, that beach is divided into zones A through J. So there's 10 zones, about a half a mile each. And there's our nature center. So once again, we get on ATVs and we go across the street onto the beach and split up in different directions to monitor those 5 miles. Our conservation program goes back to the mid-1970s. It's one of the older ones in the state. And our nature center itself was built in 1984. And on the beaches, before 1987, just some of the parks were monitored. But then since then, all 5 miles have been monitored. And we've even, the middle picture on the lower side there, even had a visit from Archie Carr, bringing post-hatchling green sea turtles for release there in Red Reef Park there in the mid 1980s. And we even used to have a hatchery before a hurricane took it out. And then since then, all nests have been left in situ to incubate and hatch. So the history of our sea turtle conservation program, like I said, goes back to the 70s. But Dr. Kurt Rosenko over there on the left-hand side was a permit holder for 25 years. He brought us into the modern age, if you will, by introducing GPS technology and conducting lighting surveys and helping the city of Boca Raton get a lighting ordinance drafted, and also using habanero pepper powder to keep the foxes and raccoons at bay. More on that later. So since he retired, and I worked with him for about 15 years before becoming the permit holder in 2021. So we continue, using a lot and implementing a lot of what he taught us. In the world, there are 7 species of sea turtles. All right, 3 of which are primary nesting sea turtles in East Florida. So first we have the leatherback turtle. Leatherbacks nest usually in February through July, and the largest of all the sea turtles, you can see from the photos, massive flippers. They're an open ocean pelagic animal making great migrations. And the crazy thing about them is, as big as they can get, 6 to 9 feet long and well over 1,000 pounds, they only eat jellyfish. So that's a pretty cool fact about leatherbacks. And in the entire state of Florida, there were only 1,799 last year. And you can see this map shows the density of where most of that nesting occurs.
So a lot of sorry, where are you?
Well, Boca Raton is down here, so we are at the southern edge of some of this leatherback nesting density. So that's a great segue to this slide right here, which shows you how many we get in Boca Raton. So our record is 33. And this year, 2025, we already have 19. So we're about what our average has been for the last 5 or 10 years in Boca. The loggerhead is the most common nesting turtle. The name loggerhead coming from its big head like a log, and of course a lot smaller than a leatherback. We're talking only 3 or 4 feet long, and eating all the crustaceans and mollusks on the bottom of the seafloor, so they can crunch the crunchy stuff, conch, snail, lobster, crab, shrimp, etc. And you can see loggerheads will nest pretty much wherever there's a sandy beach. And there's a high density of nesting in a lot of locations, particularly along the East Coast. And the entire state had over 100,000 loggerhead nests last year in 2024. And in Boca Raton, we had 824 of those nests. Now, this trend, this is interesting here because even though I'm giving all this case study from Boca Raton, you can pretty much just multiply this across the state. And the same trend you are going to see. You're going to see a decrease in nesting till the late 2010s. When we got to about 2009, we had a record low, and there's a lot of concern about the status of the loggerhead. Should it be moved from the threatened list to the endangered list, et cetera? And as soon as that talk started up, of course, the nest numbers started to climb again. So our nesting numbers mirror what is happening across the state.
So nothing weird happened in that.
It's just a mystery. Female sea turtles nest every other year or so, every 2 or 3 years. And they take 20 years or more to reach sexual maturity, depending on the species. So you do need decades of data to really understand trends and what's happening in sea turtle nesting and sea turtle populations, for that matter. Well, they nest in the same locations, but they're not in each other's way. Yeah, they're just coming up on the beach. There's plenty of real estate for all the turtles along all these sandy beaches, of course, particularly on the east coast of Florida. And if we break the state down, I said the previous slide, 110,000 nests in 2024. 90 or most of those are all on the east coast of Florida. And on the east coast of Florida, 30% of those happen in Palm Beach County. And on a regional scale, 90% of the North Atlantic loggerhead population are nesting on Florida's beaches. So you can just do the math with those colored circles there, and you've got a vast majority of turtles in the North Atlantic nesting on Florida's beaches. On a worldwide scale, Florida and Oman kind of rival each other as far as total number and density of loggerhead nesting. Yes, well, there are genetic subunits around the globe, but yes, there are loggerhead species. And then finally, the green sea turtle. So the green sea turtle, similar size to a loggerhead, but a little bit bigger actually. And the interesting thing about the green is even though it's bigger than a loggerhead, it has a much smaller head. So it did not evolve to have this big head with a lot of muscles in it like a loggerhead to crush things. It simply has a serrated jaw because he eats grasses and algae. So it's more of an herbivorous diet. And green sea turtles, like loggerheads, will nest mostly around the state where there's a sandy beach, but predominantly the numbers are much higher along the East Coast. And last year there were 14,308 green nests in the state of Florida. And then in Boca Raton, those numbers have been gradually climbing over the last several decades. Remember that earlier image where I showed you with Archie Carr and they had the coolers tipped over and allowing post-hatchling green sea turtles that they had reared in captivity and reintroducing the species in Southeast Florida and around the Caribbean. Well, thanks to those efforts, along other conservation efforts, of course, around the state and in the region, we can see the fruits of that labor. It takes, once again, 15, 20, 25 years or more to reach sexual maturity. So you're going to see whether positive or negative things that happen with populations at a much later date and when those occur. So, and as I mentioned earlier, sea turtles nest normally every other year, a female with every other year cycle. So you can see we've had these high year, low year, high year, low year. So that's really prevalent in the green sea turtle data. I think when the green sea turtle numbers hopefully continue to climb and the population gets maybe as big as loggerheads, then those will just kind of get muddled. You know, you won't see that distinct high, low, high, low, high, low, because they are starting to fool us every once in a while. And they have, 3 years in a row that kind of went up. We are expecting a big year this year. As you can see, we only had 72 last year. Now, if I were to walk you through the sea turtle season, and this is applicable to the entire state of Florida, that you would see leatherbacks coming ashore early in the year. In fact, our first nest this year was February the 22nd. So normally in March, though, March, April, May, and June. And then somewhere in late April, we start to see the loggerheads come ashore. And then somewhere in late May, the greens. So there is a period of time in June, for example, where we may have all 3 species nesting on our beach. But they will eventually kind of gradual decline, just like they gradually started. So this is a nest per week diagram from last year. You can see the orange represents the loggerheads. So this is like clockwork. Every single nesting season, this is what we expect. This is what we see. And we have plenty of time in March and April to make sure all of our equipment is working, our ATVs are running, our technology being iPads and GPS, etc., is functioning because we've got time until the loggerheads hit. And then once the loggerheads come, nesting starts increasing tremendously through that month of June. Do we get what? Oh, we do not get Kemps. The state had 34 total Kemps last year in 2024, 34, and they're very spread out. We could get a Kemps, they just don't normally. I know one happened a few miles north of us this last summer. And Florida, the hawksbills, usually maybe one nest every once in a while around the Keys or, very extreme South Florida. The Kemps, though, nest sometimes during the daytime. And we're out there doing surveys in the mornings. So the next morning surveyor might see Kemp tracks and think it's a loggerhead because they have a very similar crawl to a loggerhead. So speaking of morning nesting survey, so we're out there every single morning at sunrise between March 1st and October 31st, looking for all the sea turtle activity that happened the night before. And of course, the evidence we see are the tracks in the sand. We normally do not see the turtles. So the turtle may have come out of the water. She did what we call a false crawl or a non-nesting emergence, or she may have nested, or she may have done something in between and leaves us scratching our heads like, okay, well, did she nest or did she not nest? Because it's not always so clear cut, whereas either a U-turn or significant digging with a mound of puffy sand where she buried her eggs. Sometimes there's a lot of exploratory digging and before she goes back to the water. People ask us, I think I skipped a slide. Well, there are actually several different types of those false crawls. I mentioned a U-turn from that previous slide. Once again, the turtle may come up, may not dig at all, may do what we call a body pit where she kind of pushes some sand around like she's getting ready to nest and then changes her mind, goes back to the water. Or she may even go so far as dig an egg chamber and then abandon it and go back to the water. Turtles are easily spooked, of course, by light and movement. So there's a chance that she was, decided it was a little too dangerous to be out there at night. Or she just changed her mind. And we have seen an increase in false crawl activity, probably just because increase in urbanization, increase in people on the beach at night, maybe beach renourishment projects as well. Maybe not, the sand is not as compatible as the turtle would like, at least in the first year or so after a project.
So if the nesting is interrupted, you all know, are they able to go on to later lay eggs somewhere else?
Yes. Yeah. So a sea turtle may make several false crawls in the same night. She may keep trying until she finds a nice, safe, dark, secluded place or physical chemical composition of the sand that she likes. Yes, you will keep making an effort to do so. Last resort would be expelling eggs in the water, and it's probably very rare. People ask us, well, how do you know what species came up out of the water? Because we're out there just hammering in stakes, labeling, loggerhead, and they're like, what? How do you know that's a loggerhead? Well, We go by the tracks in the sand, and you can see they're very distinct. All right, the leatherback tracks are 6 feet wide. That orange stake in the photo is a 3-foot stake. All right, so that's a 6-foot wide track. And it's early in the year. We're talking February, March, April. Once again, early in the year. Then when loggerheads come, it's obvious is get a much smaller track with an alternating gate to it. And then when the greens come in June, July, and August, etc., they look similar to a leatherback, but nowhere near as big. They look similar because they also have like a butterfly stroke pattern to their crawl. But there are some subtle differences with little ridges and little tail pokes as they're moving in the sand. So that's how we identify the 3 species. And so regardless of the species, however, they all have a very similar nesting process, coming out of the water, looking for a nice, dark, safe, secluded place to nest, creating a body pit, digging an egg chamber behind them with their rear flippers, just one scoop of sand at a time, until she gets a hole deep enough that she's going to drop about 100 eggs into it. And then she's going to cover it with those rear flippers and pat it down nice and tight. And then she's going to spray it with her front flippers and camouflage it. And we collect a lot of data. Our jobs are very data intense. Maybe not all beach conservation programs do so. Some are just out there marking, maybe, just one stake in front of a nest and then writing it down on a piece of paper. Others get so many nests, thousands and thousands and thousands of nests that they just, mark every 20th nest or so for. But we actually focus on and mark every single one of our nests every summer, which ended up being about 1,000 total, usually each summer. And we have sub-meter accuracy on our GPS coordinates, and we monitor those nests the entire time throughout the incubation until it hatches and beyond. So our total, as I mentioned, usually about 1,000 nests or so. And this is all 3 species combined here. You can see that dip, mainly because of loggerheads are driving these trends on this particular diagram, and that would be something that would be reflective statewide as well. Once again, looking at it by species, you can see how many more loggerheads are nesting than greens or leatherbacks. Now, the nest incubation period is about 2 months. It's a little bit less than 2 months for loggerheads and greens, a little bit more than 2 months for leatherbacks, but the structure of the egg chamber is the same for all 3 species. There's a hole, kind of a hollow, if you will, about 100 eggs or so in the clutch. Those eggs are very porous, so they're exchanging oxygen and gases within that egg chamber. And then when it hatches, all those the synchronous hatching and synchronous exodus. So they're all going to hatch over the course of several days. And as they do, the sand on top will collapse, much like a sinkhole. And they will all wait till nighttime and come out. And they know it's night, most likely because of a temperature drop. And they know it's safe to come out. So this is just some video we captured. We see lots of things in the mornings, of course, at sunrise. As you're aware, all the sea turtle nesting activity is happening at night. We usually only see the evidence, but sometimes, of course, we see morning nesting turtles or, of course, morning hatch outs. And that hatch out would look hopefully something like this. And this is usually what we come upon in the mornings. We see this bowl-shaped depression in the sand where the egg chamber has collapsed, and we see all these tiny little flipper prints going to the water. So we will mark that nest as a hatch out. All right, and all those little hatchlings are going to just hit the ground running, and they're going to hit the surf swimming, and they're just swim, swim, swim until they can't swim any further, until they get to the large mats of seaweed out there on the edge of the Gulf Stream current. So once they get to those mats of seaweed, they can kind of relax, rest. They're in their habitat, they're camouflaged, they've got things to eat in front of their face, and they're going to be at the mercy of the ocean currents the first few years of their life before they maybe return to coastal waters as a juvenile turtle. That would be for greens and loggerheads. Leatherbacks, we don't see again until they're adults. So they're just out there in the open ocean. So when we mark a nest as a hatch out, we allow it to hatch over the course of a 72-hour period. So 3 days after hatch, we're going to come along behind it and excavate it. We're going to dig it up. We're going to inventory its contents and see how successful that nest was. And we try to do that for every one of our nests. And our percentage of eggs, we have seen a gradual decline in the hatch success. More on that later. So some of the threats to sea turtles, natural threats, a lot of predators out there on the beach, especially at night, foxes, raccoons, etc. Most of all these photos we took because we see the predators on the beach in the morning and at night as well. And there are a lot of human-associated threats as well. And I'm going to get into some of those natural threats and those human-associated threats for this second half of this presentation. And as far as the predators are concerned, it's mostly the foxes and raccoons that we have to deal with, and they do the most damage to the nests. And if we see some digging by a mammal, such as a fox or a raccoon, of course, we see the footprints going to and from the nest, and we see the digging. We may sprinkle a little habanero pepper powder on the nest. It'll keep those mammals at bay for a temporary period of time until it washes away, loses its potency, etc. And if they actually do damage to the nest, like you can see in the lower left there, then we'll break out the welded wire screens and put those on top of the nest. And the holes in the screens are large enough for hatchlings to come out, but of course 100% effective for the most part, preventing mammals from digging into. So, we encourage our residents in the Boca area, please don't feed the wildlife, particularly the feral cats that live in the beachfront parks in Boca Raton, because the leaving out the cat food, of course, encourages raccoons and foxes to also increase in numbers, and hence resulting in probably more digging activity on our turtle nests. Now, so climate change is another threat as well. Every summer, we seem to be breaking records of heat from the previous summer, particularly when it's dry. We're experiencing droughts. We see the temperatures in the nests skyrocket, and if the temperature gets above and beyond the thermal tolerance of a developing embryo, the egg is going to cease to develop and the embryo will die. So we see our average temperatures increasing, and we see our hatch success decreasing over the same period of time. In fact, we've seen the actual temperature in some of the nests exceed, you see 34 degrees Celsius, 34 on that line. That's lethal, particularly for a long period of time during the incubation time of the nests. And then the result is nest doesn't hatch. We go along behind it and figure out what happened, and we dig it up, and it's just a bunch of dead embryos and unhatched eggs. How do we know what the temperature is? Yes.
Find any of them alive?
Oh, yes, yeah. But every half or less nest that we dig into, we find live hatchlings. Yeah, particularly after the hatch out, the 3 day after it hatches, and we wait 3 days and we do the inventory, we often find 1 or 2 stragglers in the nest, and we will release them the very same night. The next morning, do it all over again. All right, so we actually, for a specific amount of what we dedicate as research nest on our beach, we will put in data loggers inside the nest to record the temperature during the 2-month incubation. This is a collaborative project with Florida Atlantic University. They're the ones that conducts this in the FAU Marine Lab, which is on Gumbo Limbo's property. And we put the data loggers in for them right before the nest hatches. We will put a cage over the nest, capture all the hatchlings, bring the hatchlings back to the lab, bring the data logger instrument back to the lab, and let FAU, do their work, which is compare and contrast the temperature data and eventually the sex of all the hatchlings. So they'll rear the hatchlings in the lab to determine if they're male or female, because it is the temperature of the incubation environment that dictates whether the baby turtles are going to be male or female. Warmer temperatures produce female turtles, cooler temperatures produce male turtles. As you can see from that diagram in the middle, there's a middle point about 29 degrees Celsius. Anything above that, you're going to get majority female. Anything below that, you're going to get majority male. That being said, what do you think? We get mostly males or females on our beaches?
Yeah.
Females. You would be right. Oh, and there's a bucket of hatchlings. Yes.
Do you see a differential in the temperature the deeper you go into the nest?
We don't have the data loggers spread out in that, but there's probably is some, difference between the top of the nest, the bottom of the nest, and the center of the nest, etc.
So you have sexual differences.
Very possible, yes. Sexual differences within one clutch. That's for sure. All one nest isn't necessarily going to be 100% female or 100% male in that one nest. So you could have.
You might find more.
Yes, you could. And of course, if the nest is getting washed over by the couple of high tides that help cool it down, a lot of rainfall help cool them down, shade and shadows from condominiums, because we're on the East Coast, so the afternoon sun, sometimes shadow of condominiums are on the beach helping cool down the nest as well. All right, so here are your sex ratios by species. And the numbers in the middle of each one of these bars is how many nests were sampled, the number of nests were sampled. As you can see, there are some years where it's 100% female, 100%. and particularly in the leatherback for the last few years. And you can see the loggerhead, there's been its fair share of years. And if you compare and contrast the temperature or the climate or the weather during those summers, you're most likely going to find hot and dry summers when it was 100% female and not a lot of rain. Well, this is hot off the press, actually, because I just saw this today on social media and I quickly put it into the PowerPoint because I already knew this information because I work closely with everybody in the FAU lab. But I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to throw that in the PowerPoint. This last season, when we brought turtles back to their lab and they sexed them to see what they were, well, they sexed 119 loggerheads and found that 96% of them were female. And leatherbacks, as you can see, 75% female, and then greens, 100% female out of 117. So obviously that's not good for recovery of the species, right? To have all females out there. Do not have to have a 50-50 ratio though, because sea turtles mate with multiple partners and the females can store sperm for long periods of time. So they don't need once again, a 50-50 ratio on that.
Is there an ideal ratio?
That's a great question. And I think, scientists are still trying to figure out actually how many males are out there, period. Because they're so elusive, because we see the females coming on the beach. The females are the one getting maybe tagged, satellite tag, pit tag, blood drawn, all an entire workup on a female nesting turtle, and the males are a little more mysterious. So, yeah, right, yeah. So other threats to sea turtles, obstacles on the beach. All these photos are from Boca Raton. We see it all. We see large holes dug in the sand. We see, of course, beach furniture left out and sea walls, etc. All those preventing and obstructing turtles from nesting. So we fill out what we call obstructed nesting attempts, ONAs, and we submit all this along with all our other nesting data to FWC. And we can see that beach furniture is, in Boca at least, is the predominant reason why turtles are obstructed from nesting. And sometimes they will nest, even though they're encountering this stuff. They may nest under the chair. That turtle in the top center nested. She finished her nest. She just had trouble covering up, and she had trouble getting out, getting back to the beach. And she's actually the same turtle crawling past that big hole over there. She was like double whammy for that turtle. And she had the chairs to deal with and almost dropped off into a large hole. Yeah, actually, yes. So turtles see these objects most likely on the beach and think, oh, look, a rock or a tree or something, a dark silhouette of something to feel safe and, and secure up next to it. That is, I see them take a beeline right to stacks of furniture, even though people
have you ever been able to see them do their nesting?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, yeah. Out there at night, seeing it as well. So we encourage people to stack chairs like this here. They did a great job stacking chairs, but you can faintly see sea turtle tracks going right to them. And you can't see it, but there is a sea turtle underneath that chair there.
So if those were elevated a little bit to where she could maneuver under, would that
Mm-hmm.
be?
Oh, yeah. Then she would be able to do what she, the better, thing would be, of course, if they're stacked on the other side of the dunes.
Right.
However, yes, if there was some elevation, she wouldn't get wedged or stuck in there. But at least they're stacked, and they're so heavy when they're stacked, she cannot drag them back to the water. Whereas one single aluminum beach chair is going to be trouble. That she can get entangled and drag it back.
If they were flipped, she couldn't.
Yes, true that. Yeah, if they were flipped, they were upside down.
Yeah.
All right. So other threats, artificial light pollution. Of course, Southeast Florida is incredibly urbanized. There's a tremendous glow in the sky at all times, every single night. So there could be direct lighting on beaches from buildings and restaurants, etc. But there's also, once again, that's a glow in the sky that's every single night you go outside. Now, some of the contributors to artificial light pollution is really just bad lighting. Since doing this for many, many years now, I can't help but just drive around at night and just critique everybody's lighting on their houses and their businesses, in the city, the street lights, etc. Saying that's a bad light. That's a bad light. Contributing to sky glow over there. Because as you can imagine, any light that's just not shielded and allowed light to escape either out to the sides or up to the top, of course, is going to contribute to artificial light pollution or sky glow. So there's a lot of really bad fixtures to choose from. Globe fixtures, acorn fixtures, jelly jar fixtures, and you're shopping for lighting at Home Depot for some outdoor lighting. Look for, once again, those shielded, is pointed downward and not so bright. But people love to illuminate trees and the sides of the buildings and so forth for aesthetic purposes, and that does nothing but send light, of course, up into the sky. And some overly lit areas, like if you go to parking lots, like a car dealership, and at night, 3 o'clock in the morning, car dealership with these bright metal halide lights just reflecting off of all the inventory in their lot. Anyway, so that, of course, the lighting is going to have effect on nesting turtles. They're not going to want to nest wherever there's lighting. They may have confusion on trying to make it back to the water after nesting. Yes.
Is there a end of the spectrum that the turtles are less sensitive?
Yes, excellent question. I think maybe 2 slides from now, I've got one that'll show you exactly what you're asking. The question was, is there a portion of the electromagnetic spectrum that turtles are less sensitive to? And yes, I have something coming up in just a minute. Now, the lighting effects on hatchlings, those what we're really concerned about, because we have all these nests on our beach and all these nests are hatching. But of course, if we're losing hatchlings to the dunes and hatchlings are just crawling inland, then you can have as many nests as you want. It's not going to do any good when you're losing all of the hatchlings. They're going towards land. So, of course, the hatchlings are lost crawling around on the beach. They're susceptible to dehydration. They're wasting energy that they need to make that swim offshore. They're more susceptible for predators coming by, those foxes, raccoons, ghost crabs, fire ants, whatever. They just end up getting lost in the dunes and, of course, do not have the energy to eventually make it to the water. So we conduct, during our morning nesting surveys, we're also checking on all the existing nests. We're also documenting all of the hatchling disorientation events when hatchlings are disoriented, photographing it, putting it in our GPS, etc. And we see, we see patterns like hatchlings crawling towards that lower floor common room over there in that condominium. Of course, we will approach that building and say, hey, your hatchlings are drawing. Your lights are drawing sea turtle hatchlings, and that's a violation of the local lighting ordinance, et cetera, and work with them to get them changed, the lights changed out. And in Boca Raton, because there is such a bright glow, particularly to the south in our sky, we see our hatchlings kind of skew southward just a little bit. This is an interesting study for a researcher at FWC. And if you just look to the south, it's just brighter towards the Miami, Fort Lauderdale direction. And so we see our hatchlings sometimes going, instead of going straight to the water, they're kind of angling in a southerly direction, or sometimes even going parallel to the water for a while.
If there was no light, what would they be oriented toward? What light?
They would be oriented toward the ocean. So from yes, well, the stars, the moon. If there were no light, like there had been for millions of years, the ocean would have provided a bright horizon. You would have had the Milky Way, the stars, and if there's the moon out, that skylight reflecting off of the ocean water, and they would go towards that. They would crawl away from the dark, scary dunes, big, tall, dark shadow silhouettes behind them, and they would go towards the brightest horizon. So now the night sky is flipped. Now we have the brightest horizon is land, and the ocean is really dark at night if you go out there. And when we mark these hatchling disorientation events, we're going to try to figure out what was it that caused those hatchlings to become disoriented. So as you can see, the red portion of the pile, there is sky glow. And so we see that distinct pattern of hatchlings just lost. That's evidence of sky glow. If they're all going straight to one direction, they probably saw a light last night, a parking lot or a street light or a condominium. And so it could be condominium exterior or interior. So the recommendation is to have lights that are low to the ground, that are shielded, and they're of the long wavelength. So yes, this will answer your question here. The sea turtle sensitivity, if you all remember studying the electromagnetic spectrum in school, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Well, sea turtle sensitivity is less when you get towards the longer wavelengths, towards the red and the amber colors. So this, as you can see, these are 3 species of sea turtles put basically the research back then when this chart was developed in a Y maze and subjecting hatchlings to different portions of the spectrum to see which one they would go towards or be less sensitive to. So all lighting is recommended to be 560 nanometers or longer in wavelength. That would put you in the amber and the red colors of the spectrum. Well, red.
Kelvin?
Now the Kelvin would be the color temperature, yes, and have a lot to do with the brightness of the light.
need 4,000 and 5,000 Kelvin unless you're working in a hospital and you really need to see what you're doing in a garage, a utility room, you know, somewhere that you really need bright lights. In your house, I would not recommend that whatsoever.
Get here real quick.
Incandescent bulbs used to
Oh,
be
you know,
2,700 Kelvin.
that's what you
Just the old style.
The batteries.
bulbs were 2,700. 27, yeah, 27.
And outdoor lighting, like street lights, et cetera, it is recommended to be 2,700 Kelvin or less. Like street lights that are just beyond that are just too bright.
That's very common.
Yeah, it is very common for street lights. Some municipalities to have 4,000, 5,000 Kelvin lights, and that just will blind you as a driver and put a lot of glare, cause a lot of glare as well. So yeah, 2,700 is what we recommend.
Even from an old guy, it's terrible.
Oh yeah, same here. All right, other threats, long line fishing is a threat. Fishing in general, which I'll get to some more examples in a minute, but the long line industry, just miles and miles and miles of line, just indiscriminately taking everything that of course comes up and grabs those hooks. It could be sharks, could be seabirds, and it could be of course sea turtles. So there are a lot of regulations in the long line industry now, fishing at a certain depth, using a circle hook instead of a J hook, and certain types of bait, etc., to help reduce the amount of bycatch or unintended catch with long line fishing. But if you're really concerned about that, then you know, do your homework on what kind of seafood you like to eat. What are the best choices? What are the most sustainable for the species of fish itself? And which one causes the less harm and is less destructive on the environment when it's harvested? Because there are some very destructive fishing practices, particularly overseas. So it is important to see where your seafood comes from, because the United States has a lot of regulations, whether it be on the long line fishing industry or the shrimp trawling industry, which has to have, you know, sea turtle excluder devices in their nets. So the turtle goes in the net and escapes through a hatch, and that's reducing the amount of turtles that are drowning in shrimp trawling nets. So once again, not only pay attention to your particular fish that you like to eat, but how is it harvested, and importantly, where is it harvested as well. Entanglement is another threat to sea turtles, and we occasionally see turtles wrapped up in fishing line, nets, discarded nets, etc. We respond to stranding events, and sometimes that is the culprit, why the turtle has washed up on the beach or is found floating in the intracoastal or so forth. And fishing piers. In Boca Raton, we have a Deerfield Beach International Fishing Pier just to the south of us. And so we partnered with Loggerhead Marine Life Center to help establish a protocol for fishermen and others on the pier that may accidentally hook a turtle, and know that it's okay, it was an accident, you're not gonna get in trouble for hooking a turtle. Please don't just cut the line. You know, try to get that turtle in. And there on the pier itself has a net and a cage and other equipment or whatever to try to get that turtle on the pier. So we, my team and I, can go down and get the turtle and then take the turtle to a rehabilitation facility, because that turtle most likely has other hooks in it. It's a very good chance it has hooks in the throat, it has hooks in the esophagus, or even further down, and is going to need special rehab care. The juvenile green populations are really common around fishing piers, and there are multiple offenders as far as going to taking bait off of people's hooks. And pollution, we see a lot of turtles with fibropapillomatosis disease, or PAPS for short, and are most likely associated with feeding and foraging in the intracoastal waterway, where the water is not as clean as out in the open ocean, because we see the disease is much more prevalent in the intracoastal, and where most likely toxins are bioaccumulating up through the grasses and algae that they're eating into their tissues, and out pop the tumors. So their immune system becomes suppressed, they become weakened, tumors happen, they may end up floating, and oftentimes they get entangled because they have these massive tumors on them that get wrapped up in fishing lines. So we may see both. And we see our share of turtles that have ingested plastic and debris. That turtle over there on the upper left was at our rehabilitation facility at Gumbo Limbo Nature Center. It ended up having over 100 pieces of tiny plastic inside of its gut. So when those little hatchlings come out of the nest and they go offshore and out to the weed line, if you've ever been out there fishing, you probably have seen lots of trash in the weed line, because if the seaweed is going to accumulate there, so is the trash. You have plastic and styrofoam and all that other stuff. And of course, tiny little colorful pieces in front of a baby turtle's mouth looks very appetizing. Going to fill their bellies up, false sense of being full, get all weak and sick, and then end up washing back ashore. So we see these small post-hatchling turtles washing up on the beach. We refer to those as washbacks because they most likely have ingested plastic.
How did you find all that plastic? Because it doesn't show up on an X-ray.
Yeah, this picture it doesn't show up in X-ray, but it's just through experience, we know that the turtle's going to have plastic in it. So if the turtle survives the ordeal and it's in a rehab setting, it's going to be pooping plastic out. And then you scoop it out with a net, and then you end up just counting and sorting all the plastic.
So if it passes,
If it passes, then you're going to perform a necropsy, open it up, and find all the plastic inside of its gastrointestinal tract. And plastic bags look just like jellyfish, of course. And this little hatchling actually is a tab from, we found this a few years ago. We're excavating a nest. We found a hatchling stuck in this, like a juice carton, a little plastic ring on top of a cardboard juice carton, a little just wedged right in it. And harvesting and poaching is not necessarily big of a problem anymore, at least up north of here, we're in our nesting grounds. But overseas, yes, where it's maybe not illegal or maybe not enforced, of course, sea turtle eggs are popular. Hawksbill turtle shell for all sea turtle or tortoise shell products. And you may be familiar with the former the cannery here in the Keys that has since closed and become a restaurant and a really cool museum, however, to show the history of the canning industry there in the Keys. But pretty much one of the reasons why the green sea turtle basically became extinct here in South Florida, and why those nesting numbers were at the bottom there in the 70s and then didn't start to climb again until the 80s and 90s. And boat strikes. I apologize, there's some really graphic images here, but this is reality. We deal with turtles getting hit by boats all the time. A turtle in the center, believe it or not, survived. That turtle's name was Kraken. And Kraken lost an eye. A veterinarian took the eye out, but wired everything shut, and turtle healed and released with one eye. So turtles can lose a flipper, they can lose an eye, and still overcome that out in the wild. So we have also collaborated with the Loggerhead Marine Life Center to help expand what they call their sea turtle protection zone. We helped establish the final 5 miles in Palm Beach County. And it's just an awareness program where, for all boaters and coming out all those inlets and all those boat ramps to watch out for turtles, particularly that 1 mile closest to shore. So my team and I, we respond to stranding. We have a 24-hour stranding hotline. Myself and one coworker pass that phone back and forth all throughout the week. So we're on call 24/7 because we do get calls for turtles, both in our intracoastal waterway there near Boca Raton and, of course, offshore or washing up on the beach. And we're out there getting turtles, filling out stranding reports. Oftentimes the turtles are dead, so we may bury them ourselves or get the help of one of the beach cleaning tractors to do so. But if the turtles are alive, we're going to take them to a rehab facility nearby. We would contact FWC. FWC tell us where to take it, which facility to take it to. So we get our share of strandings in Boca Raton, but in the statewide, these are the numbers of sea turtle strandings, both live and dead turtles in the year 2024. So you can see there's kind of a peak there in the spring. We just recently have seen several adult turtles wash up on shore with massive boat strikes. So the adults are out there mating earlier in the season and at the surface floating and getting hit by boats. So how can you help? Well, there are several ways to help. On the beach, of course, keep our beaches nice and clean and flat and dark. That's the way turtles prefer it. And if you're in the water, of course, go slow for those below. Recycle your fishing line. And of course, every day, refuse single-use plastics especially. And eat sustainable seafood and use sea turtle friendly lights or no light at all. Then you can see the night sky a lot better It is a lot better down here in the Keys, the night sky that is, than up where I live. And of course, support sea turtle conservation programs. You know, give your time or your money to those programs for wherever you may live or be from. They would much appreciate that, and of course, spread awareness when you learn new facts or attend presentations like this one right here. So I want to thank you for your time. And before I say anything else, on your way out tonight, I do have a table back there with rack cards. At the very least, take yourself a bumper sticker. There are Sea Turtle Dig the Dark bumper stickers back there. And there's postcards as well about lighting that you can send somebody. All righty. Well, that's all I have. I'll be glad to take questions. Thank you. And of course, we have social media and website.